Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach Edge. Well, of course, if you thought we were able to take ourselves off the canvas and recover from a series of injuries and suspensions on the weekend, there were teams that were delivered a knockout blow, quite literally, with Dawson and Nankervis headlining those who will miss the coming round due to concussion. Of course, as you can see here, that Liam unfortunately isn't joining us on this record, but he has come down with a bit of illness, so he's added to the casualty list, as you could probably say. But thankfully, in terms of other injuries, there's better news for Caldwell, who also looked as though he sustained a concussion, but thankfully was cleared. As has been Walsh, who sustained a couple of hits to his hip, as reported by the club, and will be fine to take his spot, as they're saying anyway, for round 20. Likewise, Jackson ended the game for Freo on the bench with ice on his knee, but they're saying it was merely precautionary. But concussions aside, we had another big pod go down in TDK, who suffered a punctured lung and fractured foot to boot as well, which will see him miss the remainder of the season. But of course, with trades dwindling, it is dire for many coaches in the community. Of course, if you are joining us here, we are actually recording our episode live here on YouTube. For those people tuning in to the audio podcast, of course, you wouldn't be aware of this, but of course, alas, that is what we're doing this time around. Just something new, something different. So feel free to jump on the live chat as well and send in your questions and comments throughout. So let's see how we go. A bit of a one-take wonder type thing here. But of course, before we get stuck into things, of course, as always, if you're not following us across our socials, you can find us via, of course, YouTube, which is simply search SuperCoach Edge. And don't forget, of course, to like and subscribe. And, of course, hit the notification bell as well to be notified of when our content drops from week to week. Twitter, at supercoach_edge, at DamoJ88, and Liam, at LiamEvans_95. On Facebook, SuperCoach Edge. Likewise, Insta and TikTok, just search SuperCoach Edge, and you will find us there. Let's see how far I can actually get into this without having a bit of a drink. It is awfully hard doing these episodes solo, but Liam, I'll forgive you because you are under the weather. But let's get into now how we both scored for round 19. I ended up scoring a 2,370, ranking-wise 3,047th overall, down 23 spots, unfortunately. In terms of trades, of course, as you know, if you've been following along with my Team Talk videos and, of course, podcasts as well, I'm down to my single remaining trade, and I have the holding onto it, I think, with the same sort of tightness as my Nus, as I pray for no more major injuries after being hit for 6 in recent weeks, with all of Gawn, Heaney, Rankin, and Took Miller hitting me all at once. To my surprise, I only really slid down, as I said, that 23 spots, despite what I viewed an average score for the round, and it now sees me sit, as I said, ranked 3,047th overall. I am hopeful this round, though, that Gawn does make a return to give me some much-needed respite after having to field good old Freddy Krueger in his spot as cover over the past 2 weeks, which has hurt me and kind of limited the amount of output that my team has had. But aside from that, my team has just been pretty crap. Also need Rankin, of course, to return in 2 weeks' time as my 23rd player for the final 3 rounds. And it will be, of course, happy days. On the Liam side of things, he ended up scoring, he actually eclipsed me. And we'll get into it in a moment, what the head-to-heads look like. But he is scoring the ledger, or at least he's trying to late in the piece. Ended up scoring 18 points more than me, 2,388 points overall. His ranking, he went up 2,574 spots to now sit 46,667th overall. So nice score from him. And in terms of trades, I don't think he actually made any, if I was to guess. But obviously, heading into round 20, he will have to use one of his remaining trades on TDK. I am pretty much interested to see who he goes for. But I know in our discussions across the weekend, he was eyeing off Cherry, potentially. And also, of course, we'll factor in Gawn, who should make his return, and Grundy as well. But I think those will probably be his top 3. But we'll have to check in with him this time next week for next week's episode to see what move he did make. But let's jump into now our head-to-head, and Liam, as I said, he eclipsed me this week and goes ahead to 4 wins to my 15, and the differential now is 2,067. Of course, he won't whittle that down, but he's doing his best in terms of making it a bit more respectable in our head-to-head at least. And as Bruce McAvaney would say, Liam's done a Hawthorn and he's gone back to back to back with the 3 wins back to back to back. So good for him, but it's unfortunate that he's actually not here to celebrate it. And I think, the second time that's actually happened. When I was, or at least I think I was in the US when he ended up getting one of those wins against me. But I can't use that as an excuse this time around, being out of the country. But as I said, yeah, his team's going to make a late charge, and he's pretty much done that. So hopefully he doesn't eclipse me in rank the way he's going. But yeah, he's going great guns, of course. Just looking quickly at the chat as well, we do have with us, of course, Adam, who is our number 1 ticket holder, hands down. He's done a bit of 3 emojis, one of the salute, one of the clown face emoji, and a sleeping emoji, of course, because I am recording and going live with this at 11:09 p.m. on Tuesday evening. And the clown emoji face is due to a bit of a gag in the Discord. Jump into the Discord, of course, if you haven't already, and join the growing community. But I pretty much just called him because he is in our cash league, which he is out of contention for, and he's been joining in along with Slim and a few other punters in the league, give me a bit of stick, and I said he's virtually out of finals contention, and now he can turn his attention to becoming a bit of a rodeo clown and a bit of a jester. So he's obviously taken that personally, but no, all in good taste, of course. So good to have you aboard, Adam, as always. Rookie Coach AFL as well, another absolute legend, great supporter of our channel, and go and check him out likewise as well. I don't really like Cheese, who is an absolute gun, Dale Conduit, and Carl Meany as well, which they're sending their questions through, so keep them, of course, coming through, and we will address them in our, of course, Q&A segment, which is I Gots to Know. But now, ladies and gents, of course, jump in to the first segment, which is where we go in and sum up the wider Supercoach round in general with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, first off, let's kick things off with the good, of course, and it was Caleb Sarong, and it was a brilliant and much-needed bounce back to form for owners, including myself, posting 140 against the Ds, which was his first ton, believe it or not, over the past 4 weeks. So he's been in a little bit of a downward, not spiral, but he's been in a bit of a rough patch in recent weeks. So good to see, and I was very, very surprised that he actually wasn't tagged, because that's kind of the reason as to why he's been performing quite low in recent weeks. But yeah, thanks, Dees. You've done us a solid. With the bad, we have Isaac Heaney, and it was a season low score of just 72. Certainly, of course, not hitting the mark, albeit in a tough game against the Lions at the Gabba. But you know, he's got the runs on the board to not be of any major concern compared to this next guy, and it is Matt Rowell in the ugly, of course. And I think this is probably the 2nd or 3rd consecutive week that we've had Rowell in this ugly category, which, you know, we should probably just rename after. We've been saying it for a few weeks now, but it might just be the good, the bad, and the Rowell, because yeah, it's just becoming a worrying trend. And speaking of trends, so he put another terrible score in of 51, which was his lowest for the season, believe it or not. And his run of games now read 82, 82, 79, 79, 65, and a 51, which is that worrying, spiraling trend that we identified last week. And we pondered this time last week as well, like, could he get any lower? Well, he did. So unfortunate for those owners. And of course, he will be cropping up in the next segment, of course, which is this segment right here, which we will segue with, of course, round 20 on the horizon. And for those people that have trades at their sleeve, I am awfully jealous. And of course, it is the segment where we chat about all things trades. It is The Price is Right.
Show me the money.
The price is wrong, bitch.
Alrighty, and for those tuning in for the first time, which of course it wouldn't be, because, you know, you come back to us. You come crawling back. The Price is Right is the segment where we discuss potential trades and trade targets from week to week, or whether a specific player under question should even be traded at all. And of course, it is gone, the first category. And as we always say, this time of year as well, there is no guarantees. Comes down to how the players structure up in your team, whether or not you have trades left, obviously, as well, so on and so forth. So not a definitive trade out, but a lot of these guys here are injured, unfortunately. Such is the time of the season. 'Tis the season. So first up, we have Tom de Koning ruck, priced at 616.5k with a break-even of 188. And of course, if the other news of TDK sustaining a punctured lung wasn't already bad enough, the follow-up news that he had sustained a fractured foot was nightmare fuel, especially as it does mean now that he is ruled out for the remainder of the SuperCoach season. So it is obviously time to trade him on to the likes of, say, a Cherry, a Gorn, English, Marshall at a pinch, Meek maybe. So there are a few options there, one of which we will be going through in the next category. Next up, we have Jordan Dawson, midfielder, priced at 473.8k, break even of 88. And I guess speaking of nightmare fuel, Dawson's season has been just that, and it got worse after sustaining a concussion against the Dons, meaning he will be out for this weekend's round 20 clash. And having dropped another 17k, he's now sitting at a season low price point at 173.8k below his starting price. So again, he's kind of teetering into the Matt Rowell territory here. Not as bad, but yeah, you can't fault him here. It's a injury that he had no control over. So if you do own him, probably comes down to whether or not you have any trades left to spare. And I guess outside of that, if you do, it's a great opportunity to move him on, unless you have ample bench cover to cover his absence for the week, of course. Next up, we have Zach Fisher as a forward defender, 473.8k with a break-even of 156. And whilst Fisher did indeed return to the senior side, as a lot of those owners were hoping him to do, it was fleeting, with Clarko giving him a bit of a Rex Hunt-style kiss and threw him back in the water with the sub-vest. With a score of 38 and having lost 29.4k, it does seem as though his spot in the senior side is no longer assured, and it's best to move him on if trades do permit. Admittedly, I was at the game live, and it hasn't been reported, but I did actually notice that Fish was hobbling massively prior to getting subbed, and it was quite funny because it looked as though he had shat his dax. This is prior to the halftime break, I think it was from memory, and was hobbling around stiff-legged, and I was like, has he perhaps pulled something here? So perhaps he actually has sustained an injury and North aren't letting on about. So interesting to see if anything comes out of that. And come Thursday team sheets, if he isn't named, I'll be very intrigued to see if he is listed as injured. But injury report came out today on Tuesday as I record this, and he wasn't listed. So very, very interesting. But outside of that, of course, looks as though his spot in the team is very, very questionable, especially with the absolute young gun in Colby McKercher at the top of his game. And mind you, McKercher, he was actually tagged as well by Chin Cotter in the second half of the game, which is absolutely incredible. Speaks volumes to him, and unfortunately for Fish, does see his, I guess, spot become a little bit more expendable. Next up, of course, and I did foreshadow it, Matt Rowell, midfielder, 421k, break-even 130, and we have to mention this bloke yet again as a luxury trade-out candidate. No tons since round 12, and scores since then reading, as I said earlier, 82, 82, 79, 79, 65, and a 51. Dropped another 31.5k on the weekend and has now lost a combined 150.8k. And a big fall from grace from the early season pod primo that he was. And if you have a trade that's spare to make the correction, I'd punt him towards the absolute moon. Yeah, I don't know what he's, I think he's probably the one player that's had the biggest fall from grace since, worse than like a Jack Steele from last year. I remember like he fell away obviously, but due to injury and whatnot, but this is just purely based on form. Incredible turn of events. Rounding us out here is Nathan Kruger, ruck forward, of course, 239.6k with a break-even of 60, and was unfortunately subbed early on due to sustaining a concussion, which does mean that he will miss this week. And despite a score of just 24, Freddie did go up 2k in price and now sits at 115.7k in total profit. So if you've got spare trades and need to cash someone in to fund an upgrade, he may be that option. However, his DPP is very handy for those who own Jackson, provided they are on obviously opposing lines to provide cover if needed, as we have seen with Gorn obviously in recent times. So we do need a bit of cover at this stage of the year, especially, and you don't want to be left high and dry, of which I have seen one of the fellow content creators, I forget his username or his channel name, but round 19, he said that it's his last upload and update of his team because he's got TDK, doesn't have a DPP link to put Kruger, even if he was fit, into the ruck to provide a bit of cover. But yeah, just foreshadowing that, there's a bit of a warning. Don't be so quick to erase that DPP link. Even though Kruger is out for this week, he may play beyond that and provide some valuable cover if needed. Let's move on now, of course, to the next category, and it is get them in. And rounding us out here, or at least headlining, is Tristan Cherry. Ruck, of course, 604.7k with a break-even of 133. And he's owned currently by 15.7% of the competition, and no doubt that will rise off the back of TDK owners looking to potentially bring him in. And of course, the Cherry, he's been transformed into what I'm going to call and dub him now Wayne Cherry, because his scoring across the season to date has virtually been Wayne Carey-esque. Not quite Wayne Carey-esque, but just for the purposes of the gag, I'll call him Wayne Cherry. He scored 109 on the weekend, extending his run of tons to 8 consecutive tons and 14 in total from 18 games, which highlights his high floor, obviously. The only real knock on his game is the fact that his ceiling scores can be lacking with just 4 scores over 120, but it is a good time to jump on him if you're in the market for a ruck, as he faces a very, very soft matchup in the Cats, and specifically TDK's brother in Sam, ironically enough, who has been conceding the third most points to opposition rucks in the past 5 games, which includes scores of 129, which was English, 131, Darcy Cameron, who almost, mind you, eclipsed the hit-out record that game, got in the 50s, 114, which was a score by Meek, 88 by Goldstein, but mind you, he was handling the ruck 50-50 with Draper, and that 176 from TDK. And Cherry, with a 3-round average of 113 and a 5-round average of 118.2, he does present as one of the hotter informed rucks on offer, especially for those having to find a replacement, as I said, for TDK. So I very much do like him, and he's probably the standard option. We went through the ruck options, I think it was last week, off the back of Gawn being injured, and Cherry was right up there for both of us. And mind you as well, a bit of a funny thing, because I do remember saying about Nankervis, obviously right up there in terms of scoring output. And you may remember, if you tuned into that episode, that I had the heebie-jeebies about Nank, and I don't know what it was, but it was intuition telling me not to go for him. And as it turned out, Nank got concussed, so I don't know if it was that, but didn't have the heebie-jeebies about TDK. So, it's unfortunate for those people that jumped on him late, that's for sure. Next up, we have Lachie Whitfield as a defender, 577.4k, break-even of 87, and he's owned by 16.6% of the competition. And he's currently the 5th best averaging defender, believe it or not. And Whitfield is coming off another large game with 137, having scored a ton in 7 games straight and only dropped below 100 in 4 games. His current run of form is hot, with a 3-round average of 119 and a 5-round average of 115.8. So depends if you really need anyone in defence, or if you're switching someone like a Dacos or a McKercher or a Sheasel. I don't think you can switch into the mid, but if you need cover for Dawson, for example, and you're able to switch one of those DPP players into the midfield as cover, and you're able to bring in someone like a Whitfield, he's definitely an option. Next up, we have Adam Treloar, midfielder, 571.8k with a break-even of 57. Now, he is an intriguing option, and because he is a definite pod, he is owned only by 3.5% of the competition. So, adds Treloar, he's been flying under the radar for most of 2024, but steadily scoring very, very well, with a huge 148 on the weekend. With a season average of 115.4, he is the 8th best averaging mid to date, just slightly ahead of Merritt with 115.3. Has been a phenomenal scorer all season, turning up in 12 of his 17 games with 8 scores, 120 plus, and he did flash his super high ceiling with 140 plus high scores, including 144, 148, 151, and 153. So he's very much underrated. And given so, his ownership sits at a very pod-worthy 3.5%. So he does present as an option for those looking to get that edge and difference, which could, see them climb up the ranks or help seal the win over your head-to-head league opponent as we head into finals next week. So I would very much consider him. If you're looking to move on, someone like a Dawson, you've got some spare cash up your sleeve, or even a Rail, he would be right up there in terms of guys that I'd be looking very, very closely at. And I wish I had some more trades, because I would love to bring in this guy in, especially given the pod that he is. The other side of the spectrum, I guess, in terms of antipods, who's highly owned, it is Tom Stewart, defender, 527k with a break even of 82, and he's owned by 22.1%. And Stewart, he's had a resurgence in his season since moving into the middle, with CBAs over his past 4 weeks reading 83%, 72%, 85%, and 68%. Over that time, he has scored 97, 115, 105, and a 121 for an average of 109.5, which is a far cry from the 93 that he has been averaging for the season. Certainly not really a must-have by any means, but he does present an upside in comparison to his price point being 108.3k cheaper than his starting price. So don't mind him as an option as well. As an option up forward, there is definitely one. It is Dylan Moore. We spoke of him last week. We'll speak of him again, of course. 519.5k, break-even of 126 with an ownership of 42.5%. And he's, currently I think it was last week as well, currently the 6th best scoring forward with an average of 95.3. Despite scoring a 106 on the weekend, following on from scores of 136, 103, and a 71, his price did dip to 14.3k in, I guess, depreciation, and is now priced at that 519.5k mark, which is great value for those looking for a forward upgrade. Since round 4, Moore has been swinging between a role up forward, stints in the engine room, and being camped on a wing. His scoring isn't really the most reliable, with a high degree of variance in his ceiling. And his ceiling does need work in terms of his consistency, having only posted 8 tons from 18 games, but promisingly, 3 of those tons have come in 3 of his past 4 games, so some really good recent form there. But with so few half-decent, semi-reliable options available, especially with Rankin still out for another 3 weeks, Moore does present as one such option if you're desperate for a forward in order to get a rookie off field. Upside is he probably has one of the more favourable runs in terms of opponents conceding to opposition general forwards, with Collingwood, Collingwood having played obviously already as well, but Carlton and Richmond to be coming up among them. So yeah, really do like Dylan Moore as an option for those of you out there that are looking for a primo upgrade, and it's slim pickings, as we know, in the forward line. So yeah, he is definitely up there. Moving on to the last play here, and we might check in with the chat as well whilst we're here very, very shortly. Caleb Sarong rounds us out here as a potential trade-in option. He's priced at 534.7k with a break-even of 73 and is owned by 45.3% of the competition. On the weekend, he did hit his early season form with a score of 140 against the D's, who, as I said earlier, strangely didn't tag in a game where Freo's mids absolutely ran rampant. Has all but bottomed out in price, and at a price point that's 86.9k cheaper than his starting price, he presents high upside knowing his massive ceiling, which includes scores of 125, 137, 140, 141, 150, and a 170 among his 12 100 plus scores that he has scored across the season. He does face the Eagles this week, who give up the second most points to opposition mids. But I guess the main issue when it comes to Sarong, and the one sort of asterisk that we'll have on him, is whether or not he can escape tags for the remainder of the year with games against Essendon, Geelong, the Giants, and Port to come. With Essendon, they have been using Durham as their sort of run-with player to great effect. Geelong have been using Atkins. The Giants, as we know, have been using Bedford, and Port have been using Willem Drew, but really sparingly, not as much as what they have been, especially compared to last season. Before we jump into the next one, which is on the bubble, let's have a quick look at our chat as we record this live. I don't really like cheese, says howdy Damo, shame about TDK for sure. Dale Conduit says 2 trades left, should I hold for injuries? A couple more questions here. Carl Meany says might need to boom TDK in for emergency surgery with one Dr. Nick Riviera. Hi, Dr. Nick. And he says Matty Rowell has officially been uninvited from any and all Christmas season events, and he will not be receiving a Chrissy card. That is spot on, Carl, 100%. Rookie coach, going well, mate. Hope you're well. Hello there to CH. Bit of a shortened handle there. Question from you that we'll read out a bit later. I don't really like Cheese says, feel like the best thing about TDK being injured, not that we wish that on anyone, is that he won't be able to make himself even more expensive for a starting pick next year. 100%. Very, very good point, Cheesy, because I was thinking about that as I was reading through the notes that I'd had on him. Outside of that, we do have a few questions coming in, and keep them flowing through, of course. We will read them out and address them in our Q&A segment, of course, which is I Gots to Know. But let's continue on with the next category of On the Bubble. And at this time of year, as we always say, slim pickings when it comes to rookies, but we will, of course, just, go by the book and continue on reading out those players that are on the bubble, just in case if anyone really needs to trade down to any rookies. But these do come with a bit of an asterisk as well, because they both, and it comes with any sort of rookie that are making their debut at this time of year, is naturally they're not going to be a best 22 player unless, of course, they're covering a best 22 player that is out injured long term. Outside of that, they probably shouldn't be factored in. But of course, as we said, we'll tick the box and we'll go through the couple that we have here. And first up, we have Caleb Smith, defender, 123.9k with a break-even of 10 from Richmond. So he's certainly not a rookie you really target as bench cover, considering that his second game on the weekend came way after his first game, which is way back in round 12. He was able to score, though, 57 in a full game, because I think his first was sub-affected. But if the Tigers want to target youth and getting experience into those sort of young players to round out the year, and perhaps secure the number one pick, wink, wink, he might be given an opportunity to play out the season, perhaps. So he might be an option, maybe, considering the Tigers are in a rebuild. Probably a little bit more so than this other bloke, Hugh Bond from Adelaide. Defender also, 123.9k with a break-even of 1. And I guess there's a bit of an interesting one here with Bond, though, I must say, because Adelaide, especially on the weekend, their defence become a little bit more exposed with more injuries to Butts, who's actually been ruled out for the season. Unfortunate for him, and Murray, who injured his knee, but I think he's listed as a test for this coming round. But outside of that, I guess factoring that in, Bond may be given more opportunity off the back of that. But again, he's not really someone you want for bench cover. So perhaps you're better served going for a DPP playing rookie and banking the extra 20k odd in price difference between going for a bottom price rookie as opposed to for a Hugh Bond who's 123.9k. But outside of that, yeah, there aren't really any rookies to be looking at this time of year, especially for cover. I think the last sort of ship that sailed, that is now completely sailed and you can't jump on, it would have been Humphrey from the Cats. So outside of that, just any sort of rookies that you've got on the bench that are still getting games, like a Revel, even though he's being a sub. Dawson's, especially, I wouldn't be trading Dawson. I'd be keeping, not Dawson, what's his name? I forget his name. I'll have to get it up. What's his name? Dowling, sorry, not Dawson. So if you've still got Dowling on the bench, I wouldn't be looking to trade him. I'd be using him, especially considering that he is a DPP mid-forward. I'd be keeping Dowling for the remainder of the year because I've had to use him personally with Rankin being out suspended for 4 weeks, and then with Gawn being injured, having to throw Jackson in the ruck. I've needed to swing Dowling forward and, yeah, use him virtually as a loophole at the very least. I think, once I have a full team of playing 22 primos, he still comes in handy. So at the very least, try and keep on each line if you can, ideally, of rookies that's going to play for the remainder of the year that can score well and can provide a bit of cover if needed, which Dowling has been able to do, of course. But with that, ladies and gents, let us move into the next segment. And of course, if Liam was here, we would have come up with some fancy analogy or a little story. But I'm just going to say it straight to you. I'm going to say it straight. Ladies and gents, I'm the captain now.
Look at me. I'm the captain now.
Yes, it is. I'm the captain now, and of course we chat about the best VC and C options you've got for the upcoming round of SuperCoach. And as always, we've scrounged through the data and found the top options for you to consider. And first up, we have Cripper up against Port Adelaide. And he has scored 103, 107, and 83 in his previous 3 against Port, so not the best. However, he comes into this game with a 3-round average of 124.3 and a 5-round average of 123.2, and hasn't really been taggable at all, with many teams opting to target Walsh instead. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not teams target Walsh this time around, because Walsh did cop a couple of hits to his hip pointer, as they're saying, and did look very, 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 very sore coming off at various stages during the game against North. Or if they just see that and they're like, you know what, we're going to target Cripper as much as we can. So Willem Drew, he's that man that has been tagging in the past for Port. Do they go for Cripper? Who knows? But I think that aside, Crip has been putting in an absolutely fantastic run of form. And looking at the chat here as well, Dale, you've asked, which is kind of relevant here, but I will address in the Q&A I got to know segment, of course. But you have asked, has TDK out made Pitt a bit of a good pod? In terms of this, I think that Pittnet has actually proven himself to be a half-decent ruckman. So I think in terms of the scoring in relation to Cripps and Walsh and the other Carlton midfielders, I think there won't be really a drop-off as such. So I'm not too worried about that. But a very, very good question. But I'll sort of answer that with regards to Pitt being more of a direct ruck option when we get to our Q&A segment very, very shortly. But with Cripper, I think he's not a bad option as a VC, especially first up. You could go worse. As a C, I probably would say look elsewhere. But as a VC option, 100%, I'd be looking at him if you do own him because he's a definite pod. Next up, we have someone that I'm very, very keen on if I owned him. It is Tristan Cherry up against the Cats, and I spoke earlier in the episode about the damage the opposition rucks have done to Sam de Koning and the Cats, who have been conceding the third most points to opposition rucks in the past 5 games, which includes scores of, as I said earlier, 129 against English, 131 against Darcy Cameron, 114 against Meek, 88 against Goldstein, who was rucking alongside Draper, and a 176 against TDK. And with a 3-round average of 113 and a 5-round average of 118.2, he should definitely be considered, especially as a relatively risk-free VC option. I think the one thing to factor in with any of these opponents coming up against Sam de Koning in recent weeks, the big scores, I think the most telling to me was English on the weekend, who's been, by and large, I think he's actually been beaten in the ruck every single round for the year, apart from on the weekend against SDK. And English has been in pretty bad form. And for him to score as well as he did, I think speaks volumes. Against a player, I think, Cherry, who's just faced his brother in TDK, and played quite well as well. I think similar build Sam de Koning as Tom de Koning. I think he will absolutely run him ragged around the ground, and I think more so use his weight and size to really bully Sam de Koning as he did Tom de Koning. So yeah, he's someone that I'm very, very keen on. With Cherry as well, he does have a 3-round average of 113 and a 5-round average of 118.2. So he should definitely be considered, especially as a relatively risk-free VC option and a very, very big pot option at that. So if I owned him, I would be whacking the VC on him, 100%. So I do like him as one of the top options. In that same game, we have LDU, and he scored 87, 134, and an 87 in his previous 3 meetings with the Cats. However, the Cats have conceded bulk points on the weekend, as we saw, with 148 against Treloar, 144 to Ed Richards, and a 122 to Lebont. And if they don't tighten up, LDU could have a field day as a left field VC option. We also have, to round us out in this same game, She's Nuts, Sheezel. And speaking of left field, another is Sheezel, who is in supreme form with scores of 138 and 141 in his 2 of his last 3 games, and he scored 159 against the Cats as recently as round 5 this season. However, the Cats have been the second most restrictive team to opposition designated kickers in that position of the ground. However, Sheezel, as we know in recent weeks, has been playing a bit more time in the midfield, and on the weekend, he played 48% of time in the engine room. So if the Cats leak points in that area, as I spoke of with LDU, She's Nuts could go nuts. So I don't mind him, especially as a bit of a pod option if, depending on your matchup in your head-to-head leagues especially, it might give you a bit of a leg up over your opponent if they've got bulk, C options, and it is sort of a point of difference. I don't mind putting the VC on Sheasel because I doubt they would go down that route, but totally up to you if you want to go for the Shees Nuts. Next up, we have Lachie Neale up against Gold Coast, and we were reminded by the Swans on the weekend how Neale can be made accountable as he was restricted to just a score of 78. But do the Suns tag? Without Took, I don't really think they do. However, prior to the 78, in isolation, looks bad. He was coming off scores of 149, 114, 179, and a 143, which highlights how crazy his form has been in recent weeks. And Neale, he scored 168 against Gold Coast back in round 8 this season. Prior to that, 87 and 128. And, of course, should mention the Suns. They're giving up their third most points to opposition inside mid. So, really good matchup, favourable matchup. Scored really well against them earlier this season in round 8. 168, and I don't think they'll tag. So if you've got Neale, I'd be keen on him as a VC or even a C option, depending on if you go for a VC option earlier than this game. But in this same game, though, we have, of course, Josh Dunkley. And as above, as I just spoke of, it's a favourable matchup for Dunks, who, albeit, is coming off a season low score of, wait for it, ding ding, 69. For context, however, the Swans are the most restrictive side to opposition inside mids. So that kind of gives it a little bit of context as to why Dunkley put in a bit of a downer. But much like Neale, his recent scoring has stood out with scores of 144, 143, a 140, and a 103. And if Neale does attract a tag, it'll only benefit Dunkley and free him up a bit more, who should get a greater slice of the pie. Oh, and if his recent 3 games against the Suns aren't an indication, I don't know what is, of to why he is a decent option. He scored 163, 133, and a 153 in his previous 3 against the Suns. So speaks for itself. Dunkley, if you don't have Neale, you've got Dunks. He is a definite option. We also have Flanders up against Brisbane, obviously same game. And I guess we can't talk about I'm the captain now without mentioning this bloke who hasn't scored below a ton all season. It's insanity, isn't it? But he was able to score a 128 against Lions back in round 8 in this exact role, so could easily do it again on his home deck this time around. And with a season average of 118.4 and coming off a score of 128 last weekend, he is worth consideration, 100%. So I guess he's got the high floor, shown the high ceiling, obviously. So yeah, do like him as a definite option. Rounding us out, though, we have Lebont up against the Swans, and he has scored 135, which is back in round 11 against the Swans this season. Prior to that, he scored 131 and a 108. Has avoided the tag for most of the season. Probably on the weekend, I think Chin-Cotter against him. Sorry, not the weekend. Prior to that, 2 weeks ago, Chin-Cotter against him was probably one of the rare times that we've seen a team try and tag him straight up. But the last time that the Bulldogs played Sydney, James Jordan was the tagger, but he didn't tag Bont. He tagged Treloar. So I'm expecting Treloar to get tagged again, especially coming off arguably one of the better games for Treloar for the season. So I expect that to happen. Bont to be freed up, and Bont is a definite VC or a C option. But with that, let us go on to the head-to-head, captaincy head-to-head, of course, and Liam. He's, I guess, just as I pegged back a win last week, he's again gone another win ahead. So 2 wins ahead with the selection last week of Lebont, who scored the 122, compared to my selection of Butters with an 89. Of course, looking at the differential, so Liam is on 10 wins to my 8, and the differential is 39 points, so it's still in my favour, so at least I've still got that going for me. I, of course, have the first choice this week, so we'll be going back to the safety of Lebont, I think, for me. And I'm still waiting to hear who Liam's eyeing off. But I think he did, let me just have a look. No, he actually sent through and he said that he's going to go for Cherry, who he hasn't said the run sheet. He hasn't said my write-up. That's a very, very good good option, and one I overlooked, sillily enough. So He might actually go 3 wins ahead of me off the back of that. So I've gone for LeBond. He's gone for good old Cherry Pie. It is that time though, ladies and gents, to round us out with the last segment, and it is the old classic. And it's where you jump on, which this case, we are recording live, so you have done it, quite literally. You've jumped into the chat, and you've typed out those words. And it is, ladies and gents,
I got to know.
Hey, I got to know.
exactly right, I got to know. And we do have a few questions that have been coming through. And of course, if you're joining us late, feel free to flick them through as we round out this episode. Let me just go through, and we'll flick them up on screen as well if we can, here on StreamYard, which will, of course, pop up on YouTube. Where are we? So our first one was from CH. Will Caldwell or Gawn play next week? Well, as I said earlier, mate, it looks as though Caldwell has been given the all clear to play, and Gawn at this stage, he was very, very close to playing last weekend. So I think the only reason why he didn't play was because it was an interstate game against Freo. So save the travel, keep him fresh, and by all reports, he's going to take his place for the D's this week. Thank the Lord, as a Gawn owner, and with Freddie Krueger being out concussed, I definitely need Gawny back. That's definitely for sure. Next up, we have Big Baller Brand. You've asked, what do we reckon of Rayner for the run home as F6? Has looked great the last 2 weeks. Let me just have a quick squeeze in the back end and be able to let you know as to what the sort of prospects are for Rayner. So he scored over his past couple of weeks 100 and a 122, albeit first game was against the Eagles. Second game was against the Swans. So the Swans is very, very impressive, considering that they are quite restrictive. But West Coast, that's kind of not an outlier, but it's to be expected against a relative minnow side who are conceding points across the park. So I think for me, I would look elsewhere. Rayner is priced at 412,300. So I think there are better options elsewhere, which I spoke of earlier. Let me just scroll up to those players. So you probably wouldn't have the money, I'm guessing, to go for a Trelaw. If you do, 100% go for him. If you're going for, and that would require obviously DPP, of course, because you are looking for an F6, as you've said there. So Dylan Moore, he is priced at just over 100k more expensive. If you're able to wrangle some coin, I'd be looking to get him in. Otherwise, there aren't really slim pickings in the forward line. I mean, there's Charlie Curnow, who turned his form around over the past couple of weeks at the very least, and I do still rate him as a really nice option, and I think he will probably be, he's got the higher floor that Rayner doesn't have, and a higher ceiling as well. Sorry, a higher ceiling that Rayner doesn't have, and his floor's been fluctuating, as we know, but I think with Charlie, he does have some nice matchups coming up. So I would even then opt for Charlie, who, mind you, is cheaper than Rayner. He's priced at 393.7k, so nearly 20k cheaper than Rayner. So, yeah, the only thing that Rayner's got going for him is he is a mid-forward DPP player. But outside of that, around that price point, you have to pay up, I think. And Moore's probably that player at that price point that, is among the cheaper ones compared to a Zorko, Heaney, Caldwell, and a Flanders. So if you have the coin, go to Moore. Otherwise, if you're at a pinch, I would still go for Charlie Curnow, especially if you have a Dowling or someone that you can kind of loop on field. If Charlie does have a bit of a poor game, or if Dowling plays first up and scores well, go down that route, 100%. A bit of a funny question here from Carl, of course. Love his gags. Carl Meany has said, "What's the difference between Matt Rowell and an inanimate carbon rod? In Rod we trust." Very good Simpsons reference there from you, Carl. I can't play any through StreamYard here, so I do really enjoy that Simpsons reference, mate. Steve Cormack, next up, has asked Max Holmes or Trent Rivers for the fish. Of those two, I would probably go for Max Holmes, I think. Rivers was a bit disappointing compared to sort of expectations that I had for him. I brought him into my fantasy team because I thought he was going to have a fairly decent game against Freo. He still scored 97, but he's lacking that ceiling, and the only ceiling games that he's had have been against North Melbourne, where he scored the 131, and West Coast 143. Both of those obviously minnow teams, developing teams. Outside of that, he scored 111 against the Pies, again, a team that's struggling, but scored a 58 against the Lions, a 99 against Essendon, and a 97 against Freo on the weekend. So I'm not so much a fan of him with his ceiling scores compared to Holmesy. Let me get him up here. Actually, I might be able to show it here on YouTube as I'm bringing it up, because I can share the screen here. So Holmesy is priced at 522.8k. Mid defender as well. He only scored the 71 on the weekend, but keep in mind that was a really, really sloppy game, really highly contested. So for guys that like to run and carry, a rainy, sloppy game is not conducive to scoring for the likes of Holmesy. So I would kind of almost scratch that game out on the weekend where he scored the 71 and look at the scores prior to that, which have been super favourable all season, really. His lowest score for the season has been 82. Outside of that, he scored 1, 2, 3 scores in the 80s, 1, 2, 3 scores in the 90s. Every other score has been a ton or better. 112, 109, 113, 104, 134, 133, 103, 110, 118. So, he's got a high floor, and he's shown that he's got some high ceiling games that are a little bit better than Rivers. So I would probably go for Maxi Holmes, 522.8k. As I said, compared to Rivers, 524.5k, so a little bit cheaper, not much, but of those two, I think I would go for Holmesy, especially with the DPP that Holmesy comes with as well. Really, really valuable this time of year, as you know, for coverage. Next up, we have from Dale. Does TDK out make Pitt a good pod? It definitely make you a pod, but he's not the pod that I'd be keen on, in all seriousness. Like, let's just have a quick look at his scoring. And so he scored a 49 for his first game, round 5, 99, 112, 116, 89, and a 99. I'll have to cross-check with TDK as to which of those games were they were kind of sharing the ruck load. So just bear with me, because that we kind of need to look at these games in isolation where he was rucking solo. I know that he rucked solo against the Tigs when TDK didn't play. So round 5, he played alongside TDK, scored a 49. Round 6, he played with TDK. He scored a 99. Round 7, he scored let me just go through 7, 8, 9, 10. TDK was playing. So I think these early games from memory, Pitt was kind of taking a bulk of the ruck. So you probably can read it into these games as a bit of a reflection as to how he could score as a number one ruck. 99, 112, 116, 89, and a 99. I only scored the 57 against the Tigs when he was the outright number one ruck, which is interesting. But I think he just got outplayed by Nank that game. First game back for a while in 6 weeks, that game as well. And then obviously shared the ruck load with TDK in round 18 against the Dogs when he scored a 78. So I think in terms of average, I can see him averaging around about 85 to 95 at most. I don't see him being someone that you should be, I guess, using a trade on. And I imagine that you're down to low trades as well. And I definitely wouldn't be using one of my final 2 trades, especially on someone like, a Pitt. At 456.5k, I know he's a bit cheaper compared to others, but what I will say is if you're looking for someone around about that price point, look elsewhere, really. So you almost just need to pay up, I think. Like, there isn't really anyone around about that price point that you can have any confidence in. Like even Riley O'Brien, I wouldn't be confident in him, even though he's been scoring okay. But I think he'll probably score very, very similar to Pitnet. Scores of 89, 94, 111, a few hundred sort of lit it in. But yeah, I'd be looking to pay up. And if you're going to pay up, try and pay up for the likes of even a Grundy, 559k, English, 568. Cherry's probably too expensive at 604.7, but he would be my number one option. There's obviously Gorney as well, but coming off injury, bit of a risk. Rowan Marshall at a pinch. He's probably the only one of all these guys, lower price point, that you could go for. But again, I don't have any confidence in Romo. I know he's kind of had some nice scores in recent times, 123, but was against West Coast on the weekend, 107 against the Crows, 79 against Sydney, 111 against Port, 95 against Brisbane. So he has been scoring okay, but not completely out of this world. So if you are strapped for cash and you can't reach for those higher players, I would look at Marshall. But he's not ideal. I'd be looking to go for, as I said, Cherry, Grundy, English before Marshall personally. But hopefully that does help you out there, Dale. Carl Meany, just talking to CH's question about Caldwell and Gawn. Yep, you've echoed my thoughts there. Caldwell and Gawn both seem right to go. Caldwell cleared of concussion, and Gawn apparently a managed training load this week, but should get to the line. Carl, you've followed up with a question. If Matt Rowell got an outside link-up posse and no one from Champion Data was around to hear it, would he still score a point? Very, very good question. It's kind of like with the, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it actually happen? So I like that comparison, Carl. Very good. Very philosophical of you. Jono Carroll, how are you, mate? Good to have you joining us. Thoughts on Steele as a pod VC this week versus the Dons? When it comes to Steele, I'm off him because he's virtually out of my team, as you can see here. But yeah, potentially. Do they use Durham to run with him? Maybe. But his scoring hasn't been good at all. This is his previous 6 games: 98, 83, 95, 102, 99, and a 118. None of those scores obviously are VC worthy or C worthy. I guess at a VC, at a pinch, if you wanted to sort of, as I said, use him as a pod, he'll be a definite pod because he hasn't scored, even in the realm, like even prior to that, like his best VC score probably dates back to round 9 against the Hawks. And since then, he's played easier sides like West Coast, Gold Coast, West Coast again, and he just hasn't been able to score well. So, yeah, you could go for him as a bit of a VC pod, but I think there are better options out there. Jono, you've said 23 possessions on Saturday for Holmes at 30% disposal efficiency, but the conditions did not suit him and did him no favours. Yeah, 100%. Exactly right, mate. And yeah, hence the reason why I said to strike out sort of that score from Holmes's, I guess, consideration of him in your team shouldn't factor in at all. Personally, I think. And Jono, to round us out, you've said should bounce back this week versus the Roos. Yep, exactly right. Spot on, mate. And I think that virtually rounds us out for the episode. Unless some more questions are coming in late, or if I've missed any, let me have a quick look through, or at least let me know if any have slipped through to the keeper. Last one here from Jono. You have said, or would you prefer Dunks VC? Yeah, I'd 100% prefer Dunks VC. As I said earlier, excuse me. As I said earlier, he's got a favourable matchup to Gold Coast, who they've been giving up the 3rd most points to opposition mids, and the fact that Dunkley scored previous in his most recent game to them, 144, which was back in round 8, and then even prior to that, he scored 163, and then prior to that 133 and a 153. So I would 100% go for Dunks over Steele, like lock and load style type stuff. Don't have any confidence in Steele, such as the case that if I had Steele in my team, I'd be trying to loop him off the bench. I just because it's this time of year with no trades, I don't trust him. Otherwise, he'd be out of my team, which he already is for me. Such was my low patience for him. So, yeah, 100%. If you've got Dunkley, go for him every single day of the week ahead of Steele. That is it, ladies and gents. That will round us out, I think, for this episode. Comes in a little bit quicker as well, the old solo ep. I've been speed running through this. Of course, it is about to tick over to midnight, and I've got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning because I do have a bit of a filming shoot in the city that I need to get up for. Actually, last question here we have coming in from Big Ball at Brand. What about Ridley VC against the Saints? Don's big bounce back against St Kilda. You'd hope so, mate. You'd definitely hope so. Yeah, they're backs against the wall type stuff, but with Ridley, I guess because, the Saints do concede points to opposition defenders, so there is definitely merit to it. Ridley's scoring in recent times, past 3 games, 129, 127 and a 102. So maybe, mate. Don't mind. It will definitely be a pod option and a VC at that. So as a VC, less a risk. Wouldn't say a C, but yeah, don't mind it. But that's it, ladies and gents. Let us just round us out before we go. Of course, Liam usually does this role here, but I normally ask him at this point, where can our listeners and viewers find us across our socials? And he says, on YouTube, you can just search SuperCoach Edge, and don't forget to like and subscribe. On Twitter, at SuperCoach_Edge, you can find myself at DamoJ88, at Liam Evans _95 is Liam's handle, and Facebook, Insta, TikTok, also search SuperCoach Edge, and you will find us there. And of course, a bit of a plug as well. If you aren't following my new channel, of course, it is catered to the baggers. Of course, it is Blue Baggers Edge, of course, continuing on with the Edge branding, where I provide analysis, insight, previews, reviews, all throughout the remainder of the season, and just generally talk about the AFL and their absolute issues that crop up every single week, and so on and so forth. Feel free to check it out, of course. Just search Blue Baggers Edge, give us a like, give us a sub. Really do appreciate the support. But outside of that, that is us for another episode. That is us for another week. Rounds us out for round 19. And hopefully Liam will be back fit and firing, of course, for round 20 for the next episode, this time next week. So we will see you same time, same place. And of course, as we always say, may your trades hit the mark and may your scores head to the moon. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.